The greatest game ever made. That's what people say about Resident Evil 4. Well, now the highly anticipated remake is here, and has Capcom done it again? Well, after doing absolutely everything and completing it 100%, here are my thoughts. I'm Adam Scott, and this is the Resident Evil 4 Remake. Capcom has a strong track record of remaking their older RE titles, faithful to the original spirit, but modernizing the visuals and mechanics for the audiences of the time. RE1 was a game changer all the way back in 1996, but the visuals aged about as well as fine milk. Bringing that to the standards of 2002 was like a breath of fresh air. Not only were the visuals absolutely beautiful, taking full advantage of the static camera and pushing the visuals on the GameCube, but they also mixed up just enough of the scares to keep it fresh for old and new audiences alike. The RE2 remake from 2019 is the gold standard for remakes, not only updating the graphics to a simply stunning level, but mixing up the scares, modernizing the mechanics, and adding more texture to characters and story, giving it more depth than the original. Not all remakes have been perfect, however. The RE3 remake, while just as polished as the RE2 remake from a visual and gameplay perspective, lacked key story elements. Most notably, the Clock Tower segment was completely absent from the remake, which was a big disappointment to the longtime fans. While a small but vocal group of fans have been clamoring for a Code Veronica remake, the next logical game is the legendary Resident Evil 4. What can I say that hasn't already been said about how influential RE4 has been? Originally exclusive to the GameCube when it launched back in 2005, RE4 has since been ported to pretty much every platform under the sun. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if you could play RE4 on a fridge. Well, damn. While it's been a runaway success at this point, Capcom took some big risks with RE4. They knew to remain relevant, they had to fundamentally change the core design. Several early builds were quite a bit different than what we ultimately got. One was much closer to the franchise up to this point, with an emphasis on survival horror and scares. Another went so far in the other direction that it actually became Devil May Cry. What we got was a game that landed somewhere in the middle, retaining the inventory management, scares, and mystery of a survival horror game, but with more action elements, streamlined mechanics, and a more linear level design and story progression. This new design philosophy hit at just the right time, becoming one of the highest selling games of all time, loved by fans and critics alike, and continuing to influence the industry even today. Games like Dead Space have been directly influenced according to the developers, but most third-person shooters have taken some inspiration from RE4, with the over-the-shoulder perspective, and even things like context-sensitive controls. RE4 is often at the very top of best games of all time lists. With so much love, many have worried about a remake. Don't fix what isn't broken and all that. I don't necessarily buy into that. It's not like this is a GTA trilogy situation, where the original game is being wiped from the face of the earth. So even if the RE4 remake isn't your thing, you can always still play the original. That being said, the remake has some big shoes to fill, as Capcom delivered the quintessential RE4 experience, striking the perfect balance between honoring the original and modernizing. Or did they miss the mark? You can play it right now on PC, PS4, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles. Without further ado, let's jump in. Capcom has stated their intent to reimagine the storyline of the game, while keeping the essence of its direction, modernizing the graphics and updating the controls to a modern standard, and I think they really nailed it. Taking place years after the events of RE2, Special Agent Leon S. Kennedy is sent on a mission to rescue the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, from the mysterious cult Los Illuminados in a small European town. When he arrives, he learns things are far worse than he feared. The inhabitants are bloodthirsty, but they're not zombies like in the prior games. No, they're infected with a parasite known only as Las Plagas. As the story unfolds, Leon travels to a number of familiar and not so familiar locations to uncover the secret behind the cult, the origins of Las Plagas, which is more fleshed out than the original, and hopefully save Ashley. Experiencing the events of the game with fresh eyes is a big part of the fun, so suffice it to say the story is filled with surprises even if you know RE4 inside and out. There were these continual hits of serotonin when I'd experienced something that was a one-for-one recreation of the original. But equally as powerful, if not more so, were the changes to those familiar sections, often taking on a darker tone. I loved being kept on my toes, not always knowing what to expect. Take the very first house, for example. In both the original and in the remake, this is your introduction to the horrors that lie ahead, but they couldn't be more different. In the original, you approach this unassuming house where you're introduced to the first enemy and an attack that comes out of nowhere. You aren't expecting it, and this sets the tone for the game. This opening is iconic. But you are expecting this attack in the remake, so the setup subverts your expectation. Just the approach to the house takes on a much more sinister vibe. Look at the difference. You're sucked in with the impeccable environmental storytelling as you explore more of the much larger house as the build-up before that first encounter. And holy shit does it get you. Nicely done, Capcom. With all of the new detail, environmental storytelling has a much bigger hand in shaping the experience. Often, you'll know exactly what's happened just by seeing the aftermath. That, coupled with the notes you pick up, the cinematics, and even what Leon says, tells a much richer and darker story than the original. Most of the major story beats return, but they're expanded to have more purpose. Don't get me wrong, while this is an overall darker take, it's not without some camp from the original. I mean, the suplex makes a return after all. But the balance is tilted more towards horror and does a great job of continually ratcheting up a sense of danger, tension, and excitement. By now, you've already noticed just how jaw-droppingly beautiful this game looks. Capcom has made great use of the RE engine with its recent slew of Resident Evil games and remakes, but Resident Evil 4 may be the best use yet. The atmosphere is stunning and utterly terrifying, full of dread and tension, and it's nothing short of a modern masterpiece. It's breathtaking to see the familiar locations in such rich detail. The village and its inhabitants look like they've already suffered through a long nightmare. Everything looks dirtier, grimier, more lived in. And why is everything so moist? The air is thick with death, and the landscapes throughout are eerie, dark, and frankly, oppressive. I've always felt the RE4 environments looked great, with a sense of discovery that drove you to explore every nook and cranny. And that same sense returns, just on a much grander scale. You'll be scanning every environment for secrets, a few more of the finite resources, and sometimes just to gawk at how incredible everything looks. The lighting is particularly impressive, bathing each scene in the perfect mood. And thankfully, with the Day 1 patch, the rain no longer looks like this. The characters are equally impressive, pushing well past Uncanny Valley and falling right into realism. The team took liberties with the designs, taking great care to update the look of each one. I particularly appreciated the new looks for Ashley and Salazar. Ashley is older and more mature, which also affects your interactions with her, and I'll cover that more later. Salazar was always a weird little troll, but he's gone full Puritan wacko with the powdered wigs and all, and I just love this take on him. For better or worse, Leon's look is much more in line with the modern renditions of his design. He's always been pretty, but just look at him now. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I've never been a huge fan of this look. Don't get me wrong, he looks fantastic. He just needs some scars or something. The most common enemies are these violent villagers called Los Ganados, which means cattle in Spanish. They're far more capable than traditional shambling zombies, able to use weapons, dodge or block your attacks, or even work collectively. Of course they look great, but I found their movements to really sell it for me. The number of distinct animations is pretty mind-blowing. The way they'd react differently to where they were shot was super impressive nearly 20 years ago, and once again is a sight to behold. Other enemies like the Regenerators, El Gigante, and even the sea creature Del Lago all make a return. They've all been given a massive facelift, and they're all way more terrifying than ever. Heaven help you when you hear that chainsaw. And expect some new enemies as well, like the terrifying ceiling plaga that bursts through a cultist's head and attaches themselves to the ceiling. These are all welcome additions that'll keep you on your toes and are a great complement to Leon's new combat abilities. We'll cover that in a bit. We have to talk about the sound design, which plays a huge part in shaping the atmosphere. Grunts, moans, and screams of the enemies echo throughout the world, adding connection with the game's perilous environment. The PS5's 3D audio is working overtime, enveloping you completely in the sounds of each environment. Not only does this enhance the feeling of each scene, but it's often essential for hearing creatures sneaking up just out of view. The soundtrack is the icing on the cake, with swells of low, ambient sound that increase in intensity when danger looms, or amping up to heighten the incredible action set pieces. Every aspect of the presentation is not only top tier, but complements each other to create something that's truly special. The gameplay has been reworked from the ground up to play just as good as it looks. If you've played the RE2 and 3 remakes, the third-person gameplay will feel familiar and much more intuitive than the original, but it's now more customizable than ever. The RE4 remake is the first in the series to offer 6 optional control schemes, including one that's styled after the tank-like controls from the original. Leon is more equipped than ever, with a familiar and new arsenal of weapons and skills that grow and get ever more powerful over time. From pistols to shotguns, rifles, grenades, and more, each one feels unique and lets you creatively handle each situation. Joining the arsenal is a bolt thrower, which is a new versatile weapon that can do things like launch proximity mines into the ground before exploding and knocking several enemies back. This reminded me of the bowgun from Code Veronica. That, coupled with the new crafting mechanics similar to what's in Village, lets you really run wild with the ability to create a variety of ammo types. The original was littered with QuickTime events,
which was the style at the time.
And while they do make somewhat of a return, with Leon able to evade fatal blows with a split-second prompt to dodge attacks, they've been scaled back quite a bit, so I never found them to be frustrating or monotonous. Leon's melee abilities are as awesome as ever, including his signature roundhouse to the face, and finishers like the suplex. Boom! And then there's your knife. It slices, it dices, it juliennes fries. The parry ability has been dramatically improved, which makes the combat feel more intense. In fact, you can parry just about anything with your knife. Whether it's airborne torches, a chainsaw, speeding arrows, or even the nasty tentacle claw thing, Leon's new and improved knife can counter them all. It can't be overstated how much this new parry mechanic adds to the experience. However, to keep this from being totally overpowered, the knife now has a durability bar, somewhat similar to the knife in the RE2 remake. And with that, you can now carry multiple knives in your inventory to compensate for their limited durability. So while the extra versatility adds more variety to the combat formula, it's not without some resource management considerations. You can only take so much with you, so smartly managing the inventory is the key to success. I love nothing more than spending an unhealthy amount of time organizing my inventory, and now you can even change the appearance of your case. I know! As someone who appreciates the ability to make games feel like they're my own, I welcome little updates like this. The look of the case isn't the only customization for your case either. You can now add up to 3 charms to the case that add gameplay perks. For example, adding the chicken charm will give you 100% health when you eat an egg. And not for nothing, but seeing a chicken hanging from the case is, well, it looks like this, which is awesome. One of the best characters in all of gaming returns, allowing you to buy, upgrade, and now trade items. He looks just as great as ever and has the same gravelly dialogue. He no longer hides in the shadows. Instead, he was more set up with shops and wares. The merchant also provides new side quests that you can complete during your main story, which we'll talk about in a bit. New to RE4 Remake is the addition of storage, a staple in many other installments in the franchise, but omitted from the original RE4. Whenever you visit a typewriter, you can now store items too, with the magic of the teleporting storage box. This really changes the way you play, considering that if you ran out of room in your case in the original, you'd have to sell or scrap those items, which sometimes meant parting ways with weapons too. I suspect the implementation of storage came in part with the addition of crafting, since you now need to collect a lot more items. The original RE4 was a more linear affair than the prior RE games, but the remake is much more open, more expansive, giving you space to wander and explore areas off the beaten path. This open-ended Metroidvania-like design philosophy that the RE2 remake emphasized was carried into this game, with areas that feel less gamey, if that makes sense, and have a more natural flow to their progression. It always feels good to be rewarded for your curiosity with items or crafting ingredients when you check around every corner. Exploration isn't just on land either. You now have the freedom to explore by motorboat. In the original, driving the motorboat was pretty limited to the Del Lago boss fight. However, this time you're able to control the motorboat more freely, traversing the watery depths of caverns and exploring other areas entirely. And by solving puzzles, this exploration opens up even more. The pacing of the original game is one of its crowning achievements, and even with this less linear structure, the pacing is still just about perfect. A staple of the original RE4 was hunting for the blue medallions, where you'd scout out and shoot blue medallions in the environment to unlock special weapons to purchase from the merchant. This time around, medallions aren't the only thing you'll be hunting for. One of the more interesting new elements is the introduction of blue request notes. Doing these, like handing over a golden egg, rewards you with spinels. Spinels? How the heck do you pronounce that? These things. There's a variety of these notes with a lot of different rewards. This is a great addition to the exploration and gives you something else to keep an eye out for. And trust me, the rewards for your diligence are well worth it. As I mentioned, the familiar cast of characters makes a return with updates to their personalities and looks, but the updates to Ashley are among the most important. She wasn't widely loved in the original. She was this whiny teenager who often felt in the way and was integral to the lengthy escort sections. The developers clearly took care to significantly rework her in some fantastic ways. She no longer feels like a plot device. She's well-rounded, more capable, and mature. To start, she no longer has a health bar. That's right, you won't have to babysit her health and stop to give her herbs or worry about upgrading it over time. If she's injured, she'll become incapacitated, and you'll have to interact with her to get her back to her feet. Another change is how Ashley is commanded. You have two basic commands. Tell Ashley to either give you space or stick close to you. This feels more natural than telling her to wait or follow me. Also, you'll no longer direct her to hide in dumpsters. On the whole, she's a lot more proactive and doesn't hold you back as often as she did in the original. Her interactions with Leon are more interesting now too, with a lot more dialogue between them. As the story unfolds, their relationship develops more organically. All these changes add up and are really welcome.
So, you do a lot of missions like this?
Well, yeah, but I'm not used to having such good company.
Completing Resident Evil games has always been a real joy of mine. If you've completed a Resident Evil game before, you have a good idea of what you're in for here. You'll need to find all the collectibles, complete all the requests, and knock out a handful of skill-based actions. On top of all that, you'll need to run through the story at least 4 separate times. There are difficulty-based trophies, which you can't unlock until you finish for the first time. You'll have ranking to contend with, speed runs, knife only, and no recovery runs as well. It's a completely different experience each time you run through the story. In your first run, you'll have the thrill of the unknown. There's a constant tension not knowing what to expect around every dark and dangerous corner. At this stage, you're also at your absolute weakest. Unlike many other types of games, going through a Resident Evil game a second or third time totally changes the experience. On New Game Plus, you're now stronger and smarter. Not only are your weapons better, but you now have the knowledge gained from your first time through. You know what's waiting for you and how to overcome every obstacle. There's a certain catharsis in easily overcoming what used to be so daunting. So, the challenge then shifts to the limitations in how you play. Some fun about completion is not always knowing exactly what rewards you'll earn. However, if you've ever completed an RE game before, you generally know there's some good stuff waiting for you, like skins and outfits, some new weapons, and more. I'm not going to spoil it, but it's well worth it. To complete everything, you're looking at over 30 hours. Okay, so what else can be said about the Resident Evil 4 remake? Capcom took on the daunting task of remaking a game that is so loved by so many, and not only did the original justice, but has elevated the experience. Of course, the visuals are great, that was expected, but I wasn't expecting how Resident Evil 4 would make me feel. The story took me on a journey. I played through the original Resident Evil 4 a dozen times across a dozen platforms, and I've loved it each time. But playing through it again in the remake felt new. It was like I was playing the original again for the first time. And even after spending 35 hours completing it, I can't wait to get back in and play it all over again. So if you couldn't tell already, I highly recommend the Resident Evil 4 remake to old fans, new fans, and anyone who wants one of the best gaming experiences in years. Alright, well you've heard my thoughts on the Resident Evil 4 remake, and I'd love to hear yours as well. Also, what's your favorite Resident Evil game? Let's talk about it in the comments down below. If you liked the video, hit like and subscribe. And obviously the Resident Evil 4 remake followed the rules. What are the rules? Check out this video right here. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.